Welcome to Greensboro, where a simple decision to play golf teed off change. George C. Simpkins was born in 1924 and attended both James B. Dudley High School as well as A&T before heading off to dental school in Chicago. Upon returning, he set up a practice and put together a golf troupe. And that is how change began.
What happened was these six people would play golf all the time. And they would have to go to neighboring cities, Durham, Winston-Salem, High Point to play.
Dr. George C. Simpkins and his 5 colleagues, who were avid golfers, played every Wednesday. They decided that they would do what no blacks before them had ever done. They would play Gillespie Park, one of the more prominent golf courses in the South. Denied entry to this park, the group paid and proceeded to play. They were harassed, only making it halfway through before deciding to leave. Eventually, they were arrested and fined, a process Simpkins escalated by appealing, a decision which led to the desegregation of golf courses and recreation centers all over Greensboro.
7 years to the day, from December 7th, 1955, on December 7th, 1962, Dr. Simpkins Jr. was the first person to tee off on Gillespie Park Golf Course, and he became known as the go-to guy for civil rights in Greensboro.
With Gillespie Park integrated, Simpkins did not stop there. He filed a case against Moses Cone, a local hospital that at the time refused to see black patients but still used the Hill-Burton federal stipends, a stipend that stated that the hospital had to administer fair treatment to all. This case unilaterally forced hospital desegregation nationwide as it became a precedent, a legal decision that could be used to adjudicate other cases. Simpkins also forced local Wachovia banks, now Wells Fargo, to hire blacks by threatening to boycott. The next day, the bank proceeded to hire blacks. For more information on this landmark case, look up Simpkins versus Moses H. Cone Memorial Hospital. For more information on this article, go to psaydat.com. Thank you.
there was a beautiful course here in Greensboro called Gillespie Park Golf Course, which is still here today. It was a beautiful 18-hole course. I mentioned that the same gentleman that redesigned Augusta National, where they play the Masters today, he was hired by different, he did a lot of municipal courts, and so Greensboro hired him to design Gillespie Park Golf Course, and it was an 18-hole course. It was very challenging. It was a nice course. They even had tournaments that would come here. Well, they wouldn't allow African Americans to play. Well, African Americans tried. I think in '49 it was 4 individuals. They just said they were African American. The book says it's African American. I don't know if it's male or female. I'm just going to assume that it was male. But they attempted to play. Of course, was built in like '41, and they attempted to play in '49. And so the city said, "Look, we can't have this." So they leased the golf portion, the golf course, to a small citizenry group, and said you had to be a member to play. And of course, they wouldn't allow African Americans to join. And so every Wednesday, Dr. Simpkins would show. He was a dentist. His dad was a dentist too. Dr. Simpkins went away to school, went to Meharry Medical College, came back home and worked for Guilford County Health Department for a little bit. His dad was aging, so he took over his practice, and grew up in a fairly nice house too, and which is important. I can talk about that later. And so he came back to take his dad's practice. He would shut it down on Wednesdays at 12. You know, our dentists had those dentist hours. He would shut it down on Wednesday, go home, have lunch, and then go play. They would meet at a gas station and then decide, you know, we're going to Durham. And I should say, they also, Greensboro, to combat folks trying to integrate Gillespie Park Golf Course, built NAACP Park, which is still around. The golf course is not there, but it was an old cow pasture. It had a stench to it, and they didn't keep it up. But that was supposed to be where the blacks would be able to play. So they said, we don't want to go to NAACP because we're tired of going to NAACP. It's nothing like Gillespie Park. And said, we don't want to travel to Winston or Durham or High Point. And so it cost 75 cents to play. They said, we're going on that Wednesday. It was December 7th, 1955. They said, we're going to Gillespie Park. It cost 75 cents. So the 6 of them walked into the clubhouse, put just 75 cents down. The guy wouldn't take the money. The resident pro who ran the course was away at lunch or something. And so they put the 75 cents down each. They tried to sign the registry. The attendant pulled the registry from them, wouldn't let them do it. So they took their clubs and they went out and started playing. It was 18 holes. By the time they got to the third hole, the resident pro returned. He was informed that these African Americans were out there trying to play. So he stormed out there and later joined by a sheriff, deputy sheriff, and he started berating them. What are you doing here? And they're like, we're here for a call. He's like, what, D calls and all this kind of stuff. And he harassed them for up to 9 holes. By the time they got to the 9th hole, Simpkins said, man, let's just go home. And they went home. A lot of people think they were arrested on the course. They weren't. At that time, they would send black police to black neighborhoods and vice versa. So when they went home, they sent the black police officers to their homes and arrested each of them, charged them with trespassing. And Dr. Simpkins, you can read where he talked, Dr. Simpkins Jr., you can read where he talks about how he was ridiculed and berated and marginalized, and that upset him. Like I said, he was very competitive. And they, by the time he went to court, they said, look, man, pay you a little $15 fine, call it a day. I don't think he was being prophetic at the time, but he said, no, I'll take this to the Supreme Court if I have to. And so he ended up appealing. They went to district court. When they were in district court, they questioned the jurors, and they said, found out that some of them had played Gillespie Park. These were all white jury. And they said, well, how did you play? Are you members? They said, no. So how did you play? They said, we paid the 75 cents. And so the judge, district court judge, said, okay, well, I see what this is. You didn't allow them to play because they were African American. So he ruled, surprisingly, in favor of Simpkins. The case started out first, it was Wolf versus the city of Greensboro. By this time, after the appeal, it was Simpkins versus the city of Greensboro, because he had gathered his lawyers. Well, what happened, even though they ruled in Simpkins' favor, the favor of the Greensboro Six, the city of Greensboro then appealed it, and it was on its way to the Supreme Court. So the lawyers for Simpkins, for the Greensboro Six, didn't include, I'm not a legal scholar, but they didn't include that decision made by that district court judge. And they didn't get it in the briefing in enough time. So because they missed that time limit, it could not be considered as evidence in the Supreme Court. So Dr. Simpkins drives up, meets with Thurgood Marshall, who's the head legal person for the NAACP, and he looks at it, he says, man, your lawyer should go to jail. How could they not include this? They couldn't answer that question. He said, well, you're going to lose this case. And he said, I'm going to tell you which justice is going to rule against you. He said, I can't take it because it's going to mess up my win-loss record. And he needed to have a perfect, unblemished win-loss record because he was working on other things. And he said, but we will help you with your publishing. So I think he helped him with money to get certain things ready for court. And sure enough, he also met with Bobby Kennedy, who's the Attorney General. They knew he was going to lose. Sure enough, he lost 5-4, or the Greensboro 6 lost 5-4. But the Chief Justice, which was Earl Warren, if you ever heard of the Warren Commission, he was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court at the time. He looked at it and he wrote such a strong dissenting opinion designed to embarrass the state of North Carolina, saying, you really want to send these folks to jail for playing golf? You know, some of them are veterans and some of them are all taxpayers. You really want to send them to jail for playing golf? Well, the governor, Luther Hodges at the time, ended up suspending the sentence and throwing it out, and they were forced to integrate the course. Well, 2 weeks before the course was to be integrated, the clubhouse mysteriously burned down, and then the city of Greensboro shut down NOCO Park. They shut down any other recreational facility within the city, any swimming facility, because they didn't want to go into the business of integration. And so, angered by this, Dr. Simpkins said, I'm going to change this. And so that was December 7th, same day as Pearl Harbor, was the anniversary of Pearl Harbor in 1955. So he changed the voting system. At the time, we had an at-large voting system, so whomever got the most votes, that's who won. He had it changed to a district system. So if you had a predominantly black neighborhood, they could vote someone to represent their district and different. And so then he went out on a voter registration campaign. And it wasn't easy. And he had trouble even in the black neighborhoods. He said he would go park his car, get off early, go park his car and go canvass. And he'd come back to his car, somebody done cut into the top. He had a convertible. They done cut into the top of his car. And he'd come back, somebody scratched his car up or something like this. And he would go into different homes convincing people to register to vote. He went to the campus of North Carolina A&T and found out how many political science majors or political science faculty weren't registered to vote. He would go to Dudley High School and talk to the principal and find out how many of his teachers were not registered to vote. And so he would change that. And so in 1955, we had about 5,000 African Americans that were registered to vote. By the early 60s, we had over 12,000 African Americans that were registered to vote. And they voted and changed the system from at-large to district. And they ended up voting out every city council member that stood, that was were obstructing the integration of Gillespie Park. So they changed all that, and he voted all of them out, and they ended up integrating the course. So 7 years to the day, on December 7th, 1962, Dr. Simpkins Jr. was the first person to tee off, first person of color to tee off at Gillespie Park Golf Course. Mm-hmm. And so from that point, he became an activist. And so, people were coming at him. His life was threatened. They were trying to threaten his livelihood, but he was his own man. He had his own practice. He wasn't dependent upon anything else. And I said he took over his father's practice and took over his father's house. When his father passed, he stayed in the house. So he didn't have a mortgage. So they couldn't say, well, we're going to call in that loan. So he had his own power in with that.
Mr. Dawson, you spoke on Dr. Simpkins having power and then giving him taking over that practice, giving him his own power. What did he further use his power to do?
Well, because he didn't have a mortgage, his father was able to pass the home down to him, and he purposely did that because he didn't want to be dealing with a mortgage. And so when he was doing this activism, a very small percentage of folks actually presented. They say like 1 out of every 4 blacks actually participated in civil rights because of the retribution they would face. Well, he knew that was coming, and so he didn't have a mortgage laying over his head. He didn't have an employer. He was his own employer. And so he was able to go out and do these things and not be affected the way that some may. He had the civil rights case. He had the Supreme Court case with Gillespie Park Golf Course, where it went to the Supreme Court. He met with Thurgood Marshall. He told him he was going to lose. They didn't pass on the information that came from that district court decision, and so Thurgood Marshall told him, your lawyer should go to jail because you can't consider this previous case. It can't be considered as evidence. But Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote such a strong dissenting opinion that it embarrassed the state and forced the governor to commute the sentence. And as I mentioned earlier, that before that case could be, even though they said we're going to integrate this course, Mysteriously, 2 weeks before it's supposed to be integrated, the clubhouse burned down, and the city of Greensboro stopped any recreational facilities. They shut down swimming facilities, they shut down any recreational park, they shut down any golf course, including NOCO Park. And another thing I didn't say is that beautiful 18-hole course that was designed by Perry Maxwell was sold off. Half of it was sold off for maintenance grounds. So if you go to that course today, it's only 9 holes, and you're going to see these big maintenance facilities around it, because they said we're going to basically give up this course. Voting system as opposed to at large, and they were able to vote out this entire city council that opposed integrating Gillespie Park Golf Course. And so he wasn't an activist before that, but now he was. He had a patient that came in from A&T, Aggie Pride, I'm going to say that again. That patient could not be seen at the all-white Wesley Long Hospital or Moses Cone hospitals. We had the L. Richardson Hospital, which was for African Americans, but it was always packed. You know, they would have patients lined up in the hallways. They couldn't take them. So he said, this patient may die. And so he ended up getting them seen and taken care of, but he was kind of angered by that. And he rallied up a few of his colleagues, and they brought suit against Moses Cone. And in 1963, after an appeal by the city, well, they lost, but they appealed against the city. And in 1963, because the city of Greensboro, because Moses Cone Hospital used Hill Burton tax dollars, this was federal dollars that a lot of public facilities, especially hospitals, use. But if you use those federal dollars, you got to be open to all your citizens. And so they used that money, and they were able to win that case. And in 1963, it set the precedent, Cone versus Simpkins, to integrate hospitals nationwide. And I said my wife, who's a midwife with Moses Cone, dropped a tear because she said, I wouldn't be able to do what I do were it not for the actions of Dr. Simpkins Jr. and others. He brought a golf tournament here. We had the Greensboro Open, but he brought the Gate City golf tournament here, and was instrumental in bringing the first African American to play a major golf tournament, Charles Sifford, in 1961. But with the Gate City tournament, which was a part of the so-called Chitlin circuit for golfers, they couldn't play the Masters or the U.S. Open, so we had golfers that would travel the country and play all-black tournaments. One of the largest was the Gate City Open, where over 200 people would register to play, and magnificent golfers. But he would raise money to provide scholarships for students and also better the golf programs for schools such as Dudley High School. Wachovia, now Wells Fargo, didn't have any black tellers. He threatened to boycott them. Well, within a day, they called over to Durham and got some black bank tellers to come and work, and then the other banks followed suit. So he played a major part in integrating our banking system as well.
Okay. Listen, Dr. Simpkins definitely seems as if he was a prolific individual. I remember you speaking on him being highly respected, not liked so much, but highly respected, and that went a long way. He pushed a lot and did a lot for us in general as a people, because without him, we wouldn't be able to receive the healthcare that we are capable of receiving. So I'm definitely grateful for that. And I thank you for your time as well. We'll be concluding that part of the interview. Is there anything that you would like to say to the people?
Well, I would tell you, promote 2 programs we got coming up. We do have a documentary called 450 and Change. The Greensboro 6 paid 75 cents equals $4.50, and it led to all this change. So 450 and Change, a lifetime of perseverance, that's coming out. We've interviewed former Chief Justice Henry Fry, the mayor of Greensboro, the former mayor of Greensboro, some mentees and caddies that actually caddy for Dr. Simpkins. So that's coming out later this year, and we hope to probably unveil it at Gillespie Park Golf Course. And then from a conversation I had with Reverend Jesse Jackson, he talked about how the women were the ones that sustained the sit-in movement in 1960, particularly the Bennett Bells. So we have a project called Hidden Heroes, the Greensboro women behind the sit-in movement. And we're hoping that will come out later this year as well.
And as I said before, man, the women do not get enough credit. So, shout out to all the sisters and the brothers that were here for the Suburban Women, actually a part of making this change. And as I said, man, I thank you for your time and your insight. And, I'll be coming to interview again. I definitely appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate you seeking me out.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, everybody, I have a good day, and tell Dr. was soon to be Dr. Dawson. Have a nice day.
All right.
Nah.